Hello and welcome. This is Calvin's Common Sense Crusade with me, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, on your TV, online and on your wireless. Today we will be discussing the treatment of Christians in India after a horrific video emerged showing 2 women being subjected to truly shocking violence. Parent coach Anna Friedman will be joining me to talk about the risks of children having phones in school following the UN's new education report. And Ollie London will be here to discuss the world's aquatics decision to start an open category that will be inclusive to all transgender athletes. And in the duel, my panellists will be discussing if pubs should change their name in support of stopping breeding of pedigree dogs. Emma, in a few seconds, what will your take be?
No, this is stupid.
And Andrew?
I have to disagree. It is totally stupid. I think it's absolute nonsense.
But before all of that, it's the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Thanks very much indeed, Calvin. The latest top stories this hour. 2 motorbikes have been recovered by police investigating a fatal hit-and-run incident in Walsall in the West Midlands. Unfortunately, 7-year-old Katlis Selesnev was taken to hospital in a critical condition following the collision on Thursday night. She later died of her injuries. A 14-year-old boy was arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. He's now been released on police bail with strict conditions to meet as inquiries continue. Rail services are being disrupted once again, with thousands of workers walking off the job in a long-running dispute over pay. RM team members at 14 train operating companies have been on strike today, with passengers being advised to check before they travel. In some areas, only half of services are running. Others have no service at all. Poland's Prime Minister says 100 Wagner Group mercenaries in Belarus have moved close to the Polish border, and he said could pose a threat to his country. Mateusz Morawiecki warns Wagner troops might pose as Belarusian border guards and try to infiltrate the country. Early this month, Poland moved troops to the east of the country amid rising concerns that Wagner fighters in Belarus could lead to increased border tensions. A former paratrooper has completed a 19,000-mile charity walk around the UK's coastline. Chris Lewis was joined by hundreds of supporters as he crossed the finish line today at Llangennith Beach in Wales. The father of 2 has so far raised £500,000 for SAFA, the Soldiers, Sailors and Airmen Families Association. Mr Lewis set off from the same spot 6 years ago with only a few supplies and £10 in his pocket. He said he never stopped believing in himself.
Have a focus, something that you can focus on and just pursue it. Don't let anybody tell you can't. And, have a bit of faith in yourself. All the parts of this journey where people said that I shouldn't do it, it's never been done or anything like this, they're the parts that I love the most.
And finally, thousands of people have taken part in Belfast's largest ever Pride Parade. This year's theme was Stand By Your Trans, with more than 250 groups signing up for the event. Police officers taking part were asked not to wear their uniforms, but the Police Service of Northern Ireland declined that, citing obligations to impartiality. Meanwhile, in Liverpool, crowds took to the streets as the city hosted a Pride Parade on behalf of the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. Those are your top news stories. We have more news in your next hour.
The Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, said in The Telegraph this week that Christians against gay marriage have a pick-and-mix approach to faith. He said those who argue homosexuality is sinful cannot choose which of the 10 commandments they like or don't like. So I wanted to take a moment to talk about why the Shadow Health Secretary is right. Accidentally right, of course, because his ignorant statement is rooted in biblical illiteracy. But in his poor attempt to be disparaging towards Christians, he actually makes a fair point. Yes, Christians are called to obey all 10 commandments. We cannot pick and choose which commandments we obey, and we cannot ignore any of them. To break one is to break them all. The Epistle of James, chapter 2, verse 10 reads, "For whoever keeps the whole law but fails in one point has become guilty of all of it." However, Mr. Streeting seems to be confused when he speaks of Christians against gay marriage. The Bible's teaching on issues of holy matrimony and sexuality are not founded exclusively in the Ten Commandments. The seventh commandment is thou shalt not commit adultery, which means one should not cheat on one's spouse and one should not have intercourse with anyone else's spouse. That would be a sin. But the Bible is also teaching us that fornication is a sin, which means that any sex outside of marriage is a sin. Additional to that, the Bible teaches that sodomy is a sin and other homosexual activities. It's important to be clear on this. Describing something as sinful isn't a judgment from one man to another. It's God's word for an action or thought which separates us from him. God is love and God wants the best for us. He teaches us, as any father would, what is good and what is not good for us. He gave us his word so that we might know how to follow his divine order. We have free will, so we may choose not to, and that is sinning. The Bible also teaches that marriage is between one man and one woman. It's monogamous and it's heterosexual. That is a definition shared with pretty much all of human history, Christians, atheists, and those of other faiths until about 5 minutes ago. It used to be that words had meanings and we all knew what marriage meant. There are no Christians against gay marriage because Christians are in favour of marriage and Christians understand that gay marriage is an oxymoron. Don't get me wrong, some people are same-sex attracted and there is something to be said for those who are and manage to live lives as saints, following the teachings of the scriptures and living a chaste life. Singleness can be a good and holy thing for those who are not called to marriage. But there's no such thing in a Christian context as gay marriage, and any sexual activity outside of marriage is sinful. That is the Christian faith. There's no cherry-picking there, and it's high time our politicians stopped attacking Christians for following our national faith, as we have done for nearly 2,000 years. The message isn't that some people are sinners and we should judge them for it. The message is that we are all sinners in different ways, and we must repent of our sins and have faith in Christ. That is how we are saved, not by affirming our sinful ways, but by helping each other to sin no more. The Vice President of Programmes at PETA, P-E-T-A, sent a letter to the Old Bulldog Pub group asking them to rename their pub to the Old Mutt, in the belief that this move will help avoid promoting deformed, flat-faced dogs and instead help promote mixed-breed dogs who are healthier and live longer. The letter concluded with PETA offering a contribution to any cost in order to change the name and signs at the pub. So should the pub change its name from the Old Bulldog to the Old Mutt? All of which brings me to tonight's duel. Does the name of the pub, the Old Bulldog, really promote breeding of pedigree dogs? Joining me now are my duelists, Emma Webb, UK Director of the Common Sense Society, and Andrew Eburn, a futurist and lawyer. Andrew, futurist.
Absolutely, and I knew you were going to say that. So what we do, we work around the world helping companies ascertain what the opportunities are and the threats for the things in the future. I talk a lot about AI, I talk about technology on that sort of basis. Talk about changing pub names and why it's so bad on that sort of basis. Because if you look at the history of pub names, it all goes back to the Romans, who used to distinguish what a pub or a place where you could have a glass of wine was, as opposed to a general residence. And they used to put little vine leaves up to indicate that. When they came over to Britain, obviously vine leaves were not so prominent, so they would get a bush. And they would put that up, which gave rise to names such as the Bush and the bird in the bush and so on and so forth. It then changed in 1393. There was an Act of Parliament when King Richard II made it compulsory that you would have a pub identified by a sign. And so you would then get things like the Crown, because they wanted to be loyal to the king. You'd have things like the Red Hart, the White Hart, the Red Lion, all sorts of things, the heraldry. That's where it all came from. So the old dog, not just about dog fighting, but it's a reference to that. It'd be a bit about heraldry. Things like the cock, which is that they have on a numbered sort of place like that, was actually about cockfighting. So you'd have to look at all the pubs and change it on that sort of basis. But the sign is an essential part of the British pub, and we shouldn't be messing with it.
I'm with you.
Oh, man.
Thank you.
Thank you. There we go.
This is not very much of a duel.
I love that bit of history there. But this pub in particular, Emma, was named because of the owner. Well, he was inspired by his rescue dog. He has a bulldog that he rescued, so he named it after his dog. Do you think it's promoting the rescuing of bulldogs? Do you think it could? PETA could be right?
No, I just think this is so stupid. They're petty busybodies, and it's something about it is so sort of arrogant and churlish and disrespectful to the owner of the pub. Even the way that the letter is addressed to him is just so disrespectful.
Yeah.
Firstly, like you say, there's an origin story behind this name, and we've seen that Peter obviously hooking themselves onto this trend that we've seen with Black Lives Matter, where people will try to bully a pub into changing its name because it's regarded as offensive. They've managed to come up with some way in which this is offensive in relation to animal rights, and now they're trying to bully this pub into, you know, saying that if you don't do this, then you're promoting the bad breeding of animals. I love animals. I also have concerns about breeding, but it's also, I think we have to recognise that they've gone for the bulldog, and look at that beautiful bulldog there. This is a national symbol of British identity. So they've just happened to pick on a pub name that isn't just a dog that may have some breeding issues, but also a dog that is symbolic. It's associated with who? Churchill, somebody else who has been attacked by the Vandals and iconoclasts in relation to other progressive movements. So I think that this is disingenuous nonsense from them, and they need to be treated. They need to be treated like children. They need to be told no in the way that you would tell a child no.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew, I'm glad Emma touched on that, because they've also called the Churchill dog retired as well. And it's not just the insurance company. It is, like Emma says, it's a British institution.
Absolutely. And what's interesting as well, and it doesn't just stop there, this whole wokery, because they tried to change the ploughman's lunch in a pub in Dartmouth, and they wanted to call it the plough person's lunch because they thought it would be... I know, it's wonderful stuff, isn't it? It has to stop. The plough people. I love the alliteration, though. You can have a postman, a post person, all these sort of things. It makes
all those modern plough women so offended.
A person hole as opposed to a man hole. All those things. I think we have to... There is a serious issue. The serious issue is sometimes the inbreeding of dogs. It is... and if you look at the history of the bulldog, that's what tended to be happening. It tended to be... Some of it was fairly cosmetic as to why they did it. And a lot of these dogs, which have very snuffed noses, it's basically very difficult for them to breathe. And you have similarly with cats. We adore cats and all sorts of animals, but they've been bred in a certain way, which are for cosmetic reasons. And I think you're right to look at that. Is that the right sort of way?
And it's cruel. It's cruel. I mean, some of these animals, they can't exercise. Their health is impacted by this. And the point that they make that, you know, a mutt will live longer. It's just, but that, you know, maybe they're trying to use this as a way of raising some attention for their cause. But it's clearly a disingenuous attack on this pub, trying to basically bully and pressure them into changing the name away from something that, and if you as you mentioned, you know, the historic basis of pub names. Part of this is the erasure of history. This is erasing our ability to meet our history in our daily life. Some of these pub names are ancient.
Oh, absolutely.
They go back to periods of time where they didn't even have the names written on the pubs. It would have just been an image. In the case of this particular pub, as you mentioned, Calvin, you know, this has it's a modern history, but it's a good distinctive reason for that pub name. And I think that Peter just needs to get their noses
You mustn't
out there.
rewrite history. And the reason for a lot of the pub signs originally was because illiteracy was obviously enormous. So in order to identify, you had these particular pictures. And what tends to happen, they tend to follow particular things, whether it's hunting or they follow heraldry. The reason we have, I think there was 150 families that have a red lion as part of their emblem. So what then happens is we have about 600 pubs called the Red Lion because it followed that sort of stuff. But calling it the old mutt is deliberately derogatory, isn't it? It's sort of where you go for hair of the dog, deliberately. You work on that sort of principle. So it has to be wrong. Peter do some great jobs, but I think this is not going to help their cause.
Can we just remind ourselves that Peter are the same people who wanted to replace to kill two birds with one stone, to feed two birds with one scone.
Oh, my God.
With one scone?
That's how seriously we should take
They called it a scone as opposed to a scone? That's outrageous.
I think that's just Emma. So they're not actually animal rights activists at this point, though, are they? Because they're not protecting animals like this. This is true.
They're radical. And like I say, I love animals. I care about animal rights. I don't want animals to be bred in a way that makes them suffer and makes them live shorter lives. But Peter, they're so radical in some of the suggestions. It's not radicalism so much as just silliness. It's very difficult to take them seriously. And just like Just Stop Oil are doing damage to the cause that they're trying to put forward, as many environmentalists recognise actually on their own side, so too are Peter I think, doing damage to the cause of animal rights, because there are many people who won't be on their side because they're being so silly.
No, you're absolutely
Whereas
right.
actually, the great British public love animals.
Yes.
We would be totally on their side if they weren't alienating people with stupid suggestions like this.
And that has to be an essence of anybody trying to communicate and persuade people, because it's actually honey that is more sort of effective than the stick, isn't it? And you work on that sort of basis because a lot of people, as you rightly say, they alienate people. Just Stop Oil is a classic example. I don't know anybody out there who's not part of the Just Stop Oil thing who would support their actions. They might support, hang about, you need to look at certain of the issues, but doing it in this way actually is backfiring. And I think Peter have got the same problem. And I think if you talk about the sensible thing about breeding, talk about how it's bad for the animals and so on and so forth, but don't go changing our heritage.
You make a fair point, because Peter are known for trolling people online, especially on social media, almost to the point, you could say, of bullying and harassment. And I don't think that wins people over to your cause.
George Orr, not War, said, shed more light and less heat, and you might persuade people.
And Emma, we heard similar things. I mean, I do think this is virtue signalling. You know, the pub used to be called the Sea Lion, and I don't think anyone would say that's promoting the breeding of sea lions. So it's, it's a ridiculous suggestion. But I remember on Nana's show on this same bar, maybe a year or two ago, when we were talking about the black cock being petitioned to be renamed because the word black was in it, therefore it was racist, even though it's clearly.
I think there was a pub name that was called something like the. I'm not going to say it because it could be regarded as a swear word if there are children watching, but the black female dog.
Yes, I do remember that, yeah.
And I think that was
there was an outrage about that sort of stuff, that's right.
So in a way, I don't really agree with having changed it from the original Sea Lion, because I like things to be kept the same.
But it also happens with street names and things like that. You look at some of the medieval street names, which I won't repeat here because they definitely would have problems with Ofcom, but look at what they were called, and it all reflected what tended to happen in those back alleys.
Black Boy Lane and
all those sort of things, and also worse things about other things. But people can Google it, they can have a look. But this is what you've got to be careful of. I think it's wrong to do. People are wrong, and they're doing themselves a disservice.
Wonderful debate there. Thank you very much. I say debate. Thank you very much. Plenty more to come this evening on my Common Sense Crusade. Next, we'll be joined by Daniel McInnery to discuss the gut-wrenching video that shows 2 Christian women being abused and assaulted in India. Plus, a parent coach, Anna Friedman, will be with us to tell us more on the risks of children having phones in schools. See you soon.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion. People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Two Kuki women have been assaulted in Manipur, India, in the latest example of Christians across the world being subjected to gruesome violence. A horrifying video has emerged showing the naked Christian women weeping, wincing in pain, and begging their attackers to show some mercy. Following the video's emergence, India has been put under the spotlight, and it has raised huge questions about the failure of the state. The police say they have opened a case of gang rape and arrested a man, adding that others will be held soon. Prime Minister Modi said the incident had shamed India and that no guilty will be spared. Joining me now, I have Daniel McKinney, Parliamentary Officer at Open Doors UK and Ireland. Daniel, thank you for joining us again. It's been a while. Hope you're well. This is a horrible story to have you on to discuss, though.
Thank you.
We can't even show the video because it's too gruesome for our audience at this time of day. But if people do want to see it, it's on Twitter, it's on social media. They can check it out for themselves. What's your take on it?
I mean, it's horrific. You know, there's no way around it. It really is one of the most sort of abhorrent examples of this that we've seen across India. I mean, we believe that the video is from May. There's been a restriction on communications, on Wi-Fi communications in the state of Manipur since then. So we might expect even more of these videos to come out. Unfortunately, there has been a trend across India to victimize Christian communities, by targeting women in particular in particularly violent ways by Hindutva, Hindu radicalists.
Well, what worries me, Daniel, is that we suspect it was the 4th of May, so over 2 months. Now it's gone viral. The government of India are taking action, but it's taken them all this time to do anything about it. And I know that we've heard from the Supreme Court, they've said that if the government does nothing, they will take action. They said, we will take action if you do not. So do you think there are going to be serious consequences?
Well, I certainly hope so. I mean, there have been accusations against the ruling party, the BJP, that they've been too slow to act. They certainly have now. Again, throughout this, there's been suggestions that there's been sort of complicitness from the local authorities in particular and from the local police. Now, Narendra Modi has said that he'll respond to that with the full force of the law, and I certainly hope that that does happen, because this cannot be allowed to continue with impunity as it has been doing across India.
Well, this is it, isn't it? The video obviously shows a horrible, horrible incident of these women naked, weeping, wincing. They're in pain, and there's this suggested gang rape. But this is just one incident. We know that since we talked about the 4th of May, since then we've had 120 deaths of Christians. We've had devastation of hundreds of churches, homes, villages and shops. The growing Christian persecution in this area in particular is a serious concern, and it's growing, is it not?
Absolutely. I mean, Christian persecution across the world, we've seen growing, decade upon decade. Since at Open Doors, we've been studying this since 1993, so 30 years now. And you can just see the trends getting worse and worse. In India in particular, there's been increasing introduction of anti-conversion laws, particularly targeting Hindu converts to Christianity. And we will continue to see this grow if impunity is allowed to continue.
Thank you very much. That was Daniel McKinney from Open Doors UK. Thank you for your time today. Now, I want to see what my panel make of this. Andrew, I know you've seen the video. What were your impressions?
Well, it was absolutely horrendous. I did watch it. It was harrowing, was the word. You see this. And Modi was right to call it out and say, look, nobody who's been guilty of these things will go free. So you need to look at these sort of things. My concern, as you rightly pointed out, was it took from May, several months ago, several weeks ago, for this something to become public. And I think they should have controlled the narrative early on. It is deplorable what happened. Absolutely harrowing. And disgusting is the word I would use.
Yeah, and Andrew makes an interesting point. I think the only reason it's gone viral is because India lifted their ban on the internet for a brief period. You know, they suppress free speech over there and free press. Do you think that's part of the problem?
Well, I think Modi didn't do anything until this went viral. I think it was something like 70 days. And I read that, I haven't watched the full video because I don't want to, but I read that in the video, I think one of the women in the video said that that the police actually handed the women over to the mob. And so this is some kind of ethnic tribal conflict where essentially one group, the Christian group, seem to have taken the hills and the other group have taken the valley. And I think these women are believed to have been fleeing from their village that was set on fire when they were surrounded by another violent mob who then took them off and everything that you've just described. This is something, the persecution of Christians worldwide is something that has been going on for a very long time. And people like Baroness Caroline Cox, particularly been trying to raise awareness of what's been happening in Nigeria, to very little avail, actually, because there's not very much interest in these stories. And I think one of the reasons why we don't pay enough attention here in the West, I did a documentary not that long ago for ADF International, which is a Christian legal organisation, and through that did an interview with a couple that had fled from Pakistan because they'd been imprisoned and put on with a death sentence. They managed to be sort of extradited away to a safe European country. But for a long time, they were on death row for charges of blasphemy against them. And the situation in Pakistan is also awful, with mobs attacking villages and so on. And what came out of the interviews that I did for that was that here in the West, it seems that there is very little interest in Christian persecution worldwide, because we've got it into our heads that Christianity has some kind of hegemony in Western countries, and Christianity is privileged, and therefore Christians can't suffer persecution, when the reality is that Christians are the most persecuted group worldwide. This is happening in so many countries. And I'm glad that this video has gone viral, not least because it's forced the Indian authorities to pay attention, because the Supreme Court in India basically said, if you know, to the government, if you don't do something about this, then we'll have to. The fact that this has gone viral, the fact that this is getting at least some attention in the West, not as much as it should be, I hope will make people pay attention to groups like Open Doors, like ADF, like Christian Concern, who have been trying to highlight these issues for a very long time, because it's not just the Indian government that is turning a blind eye to this horrific persecution, this sort of ethnic cleansing, religious genocide that's taking place in, a number of countries. But it's also here in the West, we're just turning a blind eye to it. We're not paying any attention.
Andrew, do you think it's a lack of political appetite?
I think there's a couple of things. What happens in the news cycle is we shine our spotlight on one horrible incident and we tend to move on. What I would say in this incident is we must absolutely ensure that the pressure's kept on. So Modi does what he says he's going to do, and to basically stop. It doesn't matter what the reasons were that it was sparked. You can understand those reasons. But this is unacceptable on any basis. And it's not just about Christians, there are other various terrible ways and terrible things that are happening. I think that's what we need to do. As a news organisation, we need to make sure that we continue to shine a spotlight to make sure that these things don't happen in the future, and that there is actually those people are brought to justice, to discourage people ever going down this route again for anybody.
I think that's a good challenge. Let's have a bookmark on that topic, and let's bring this back up on the Common Sense Crusade at some point in the future and find out what has actually been done by the Indian government. But I think Emma raises the wider point in that this isn't just India. This is across the globe, and we don't seem to have any avenue for us in England to help in these countries. We're all about bringing over Islamic refugees and helping countries that aren't Christian, but we don't have a prioritisation for helping and bringing over Christians that need support.
There is no joined-up thinking, and actually this is one of the reasons why I think that we need to have better controls on migration, not to sort of diverge onto a different subject. But we need to be prioritising people who really need to be here. There are people who are being persecuted for blasphemy in Pakistan. There are people who are having their entire villages set on fire. I think it's 140 people, mostly from that Christian tribe, that have been killed in this ethnic conflict that's taking place in Manipur. We need to be prioritising people who really need our help, who really need to be taken somewhere that is safe. And we can't do that if our resources are stretched and overburdened. So when people make the argument that those who want to have controls on our borders and better sovereignty over our migration system, that is coming from a place of, you know, as the Archbishop of Canterbury has said, a lack of compassion. They're wrong. We need to be helping the people who really need us, and we need to have joined up thinking so that we can pressure those countries where this is happening to you know, to pay some attention to it and to make sure that the pressure is constantly kept on them so that this can't happen.
But it's also not just leaving their home, though. It's not just about immigration. It is basically they should be safe to stay in their homes, and that's why we need to shine a spotlight on it.
Thank you both very much. That was Emma and Andrew. Plenty more to come this evening on my Common Sense Crusade. Next, we'll be talking to a parent coach, Anna Friedman, on the risks of children having phones in schools. Plus, stick around to hear from Ollie London on his newest book, Gender Madness. Back in a few.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Hope you were able to enjoy some of the sunny spells we did have around today, but there are still some showers lingering on tonight and into tomorrow, particularly for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, where there's still the chance that some of those could be heavy. A few pushing into Western England, Wales through the Bristol Channel area, but eastern areas of England generally staying drier with some clear intervals. It's not going to be too chilly overnight for most of us, holding up around 12 to 14 degrees Celsius, might drop into single figures across the far northeast of Scotland. Showers from the word go as well for central Scotland, pushing their way down further south into northern England as well. Still the chance that they could be heavy, maybe the odd rumble of thunder during the day as well. For the southwest, though, we are going to see the cloud building as outbreaks of rain push their way in for Wales, southwest England, then into Northern Ireland and eventually southeast England later on as well. Where you do hold on to the sunshine, though, climbing to highs around 21, 22 degrees Celsius. That area of low pressure that's bringing this rain will steadily be progressing its way eastwards overnight. Light winds further to the north where those isobars are spaced well apart but squeezing together across the south. Really quite breezy first thing on Monday morning, potential for 40-mile-an-hour gusts along some coast of the English Channel. These outbreaks of rain still lingering in places as well. A few brighter spells for central England, but the rest of the sunshine certainly reserved for northern areas of Scotland. And there'll be further showers as we do head into the rest of the week as well. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Common Sense Crusade with me, the Reverend Calvin Robinson, on your TV, online and on your wireless. While technology undeniably offers numerous benefits, it also presents potential hazards, especially when young people are involved. The UN's latest education report warns that allowing access to mobile phones in schools introduces risks, including distraction, disruption, bullying and abuse, and can be detrimental to learning. Yet others countered that mobile phones were useful for contacting parents, seeking to strike a balance between connectivity and safeguarding of children's well-being. So should or shouldn't children have phones in schools? Now joining me, I have Anna Friedman, a parent coach who works with schools and parents to help improve children's well-being. Anna, thank you so much for joining. This is actually one of my major bugbears. This is one of the issues I'm most concerned about and talk about most often. So I'm going to let you lead with why should or shouldn't parents allow their children to take phones in schools.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Calvin, for having me. I'm really delighted to be here today. Well, the UNESCO report has opened up many questions, and I really welcome the report because it sits among a whole spectrum of regarding technology in education, which is much needed. This review, this rigour, these questions, this legislation, and everything else that this allows for. Specifically, the call for bans on mobile phones in schools is one segment of this piece around technology and education, and I'm really in favour of it. I feel for all those reasons you've named, disruption, bullying, there's a plethora of reasons why we might not want to have our children have mobile phones in schools. The safeguarding piece is something to consider too in today's society. However, the disruption that it wreaks havoc on teachers, taking away from their teaching opportunities, is really significant. So I really welcome this ban, and feel like it's an opportunity to change a lot of culture and behaviours around device use for children and young people, not just in school but outside of school too, because albeit we might be mitigating use in school, this will still fall out to out of school hours, which has impacts across mental health and so much more for our young people growing up with this completely new phenomena that hasn't really been tested or had any of that evidence-based approach in order to before it's been put into the hands of our young people.
Absolutely. Anna, the government says that they back headmasters who want to ban phones in their schools, but should they go beyond backing headmasters and encouraging headmasters to ban phones in their schools?
Well, the report calls for a context-dependent approach, so which I'm also in favour of, because if we keep really close to the ground and how our students and our school is operating in that context, then we can produce solutions that are aligned. And yes, I would be in favour of head teachers supporting this ban because of all those reasons aforementioned. And at the
Anna Friedman, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate your take on that. I want to bring my panel in on this. Emma Webb, you know I rant on about this all day, every day, but children having... I was a safeguard officer in a school, and I saw firsthand what children say and send to each other, and how, honestly, it destroyed me just seeing it. And if parents knew what was going on, not just the bullying of each other, the abuse of each other, but the grooming from outside, from older people, and the pornography that they have access to, but just the utter distraction from what they should be doing, which is learning. Do you think this ban should be implemented outright?
Yes.
Cool.
I think this has become both of our sort of personal crusades. I think it makes so much sense. I mean, there's a whole other discussion to be had about whether or not that we should ban ownership of smartphones for under 16s, because it's like giving hard drugs to your kids. Yeah. But I even know from my own experience, you know, I'm completely addicted to this thing.
Yeah, same.
And it's a distraction for me. If I want to really focus on work, I have to put it somewhere else. And if I, as an adult, struggle with it in that way, because we know from studies that, you know, your phone it has an effect on your brain that is not dissimilar from taking hard drugs. It's like a kind of cocaine or something. And to have that in the hands of undeveloped minds is obviously going to be harmful. There have been studies that have suggested that it harms IQ, it harms your intellectual development. Yep. It is a distraction. It does affect the length of time that you can, you know, concentrate on something. The idea that smartphones should be brought into schools, I think, is absurd. Children don't need smartphones. They can have a dumb phone. It doesn't mean that they can't access the internet. It doesn't mean that they can't use the internet for learning when they're supervised. But there is absolutely no reason at all why children should have smartphones instead of dumb phones. And the argument that I often hear, and we've heard this argument on this show but in previous weeks, is that, oh well, we wouldn't be able to implement it. There's no point in discussing it because it's just too hard. That's ridiculous. Of course not. You know, that's just washing your hands of it. Yeah. Parents need to be able to have control and not to just admit defeat. I understand that these things are difficult and that sometimes particularly older children can be a bit sneaky and deceptive if they really want something. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't aspire to preventing them from having 24-hour access to something that we know is bad for their brains.
Yeah. Andrew, we know that there's an offloading of memory here, so we don't retain as much knowledge if we know it's at our fingertips in our smart devices. We also know that these devices are addictive, and we know that you know, they can block children having dreams, and they interrupt our thought processes, and we know that children who have these devices get lower grades and have lower self-esteem. So is there any reason we should be allowing them?
What I love about this programme is it's shining more light and less heat on the topic. And actually, if you get both sides of the argument together and say, look, why do you need a phone? And some of the things about safeguarding, so you make sure you have a phone when you're on your bus going home to make sure your parents can make sure you get home safely, that's very, very important. Do you need one in the classroom? Well, some teachers will say that they use it as part of the lesson. So in music and so on and so forth, you can do that. They're saying about blocking it in the playground. And the problem is, most people now, I always say that the more means of communication we have, the less we're able to communicate. Because you have your heads down on your screen, it's used for bullying, where it used to be when we were at school, and you didn't have the technology to do that, but you close your door and you're safe. Now this follows you everywhere.
It's like having strangers in the playground.
Absolutely. You've got to be really careful. But what we have to work out is to encourage new skills of communication. And if you use rather like AI, which is basically helping people write their essays and so on and so forth, so you want people to become orators. I mean, one of the policies that they talk about is actually getting people to be able to communicate is really, really powerful. So I wouldn't block it altogether. I would work out when do you need it, maybe as part of your education or for safeguarding on the way home, and find that solution. In the same way as when you go to the O2 for certain gigs now, you have to hand in your mobile phone so you don't record the material with comedians or whatever it's going to be on that sort of basis.
Can I come in very quickly on this suggestion that smartphones can be used during lessons, because in the Guardian article on this, and they made a point that, you know, not every child has access to it, and so you shouldn't use things in class that the school isn't providing. Yeah. But two of the examples that were given for how phones are used in classrooms, I thought were just very strange. So one of the benefits apparently is that when the teacher writes something down on the whiteboard, the child can just snap it on their phone and they have the information there. Well, they're not writing it down and it's not going into their brain if they're just snapping it on their phone. And I very often do that with things to sort of like bookmark it for later, and then I forget to even come back to it. Another use that you could have is in music lessons,
Yes.
using it as a dictaphone so that you can record music or whatever. The schools should provide dictaphones if they need dictaphones. They should not require children to have a device like a smartphone in order to do that.
And everybody
Very
has to have
strange
access.
argument.
You've got to be absolutely right.
Preach. Thank you very much. I'd like to give a special thanks to my dualist, Emma Webb, UK Director of Common Sense Society, and Andrew Eburn, futurist and lawyer. And actually, Emma will be hosting next week as I'm off on my holiday bobs, so thank you for that as well, Emma. Coming up in the final part of my Common Sense Crusade this week, we'll be talking to Ollie London about his new book, Gender Madness. Be back with you in 3.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, I'm delighted to be joined for the final part of the show by the well-known internet personality and broadcaster, Ollie London. Later this year, Ollie will be releasing his latest book, Gender Madness, One Man's Devastating Struggle with Woke Ideology and His Battle to Protect Children. Ollie, welcome to the studio again. I know it's been a while. Thank you for coming in.
It's been a while, yes. Yeah, nice to see you.
What is your book going to be about?
So Gender Madness is really looking at all of the societal issues we have right now with children being addicted to social media, with children being influenced by what the algorithms promote. So that includes a lot of gender ideology, children being confused about becoming non-binary or trans. And we see on TikTok, for instance, you see kids sharing their double mastectomy stories and how to inject hormones, and I think that's very harmful. So part of that's that's discussing that. Part of it's discussing how school systems have been infiltrated, and also how faith can help change your life. Because, you know, I've been through a crazy identity crisis. I talk about that a lot in the book, and how to overcome their struggles. So I want this book to motivate people that may be questioning their identity, and just tell them, look, you are good enough as it is, you know, be happy with the way God made you.
I love that, because last time we had you on, we talked about your faith journey and how, I mean, you originally transitioned into a K-pop artist, and then, then you wanted to become like a Barbie, and then you detransitioned into a Ken. And your faith kind of influenced you in your detransition, am I right?
Yes, you know, I needed something in my life to guide me, because I was, you know, struggling with all these crazy different identities, and I needed some guidance. I needed to be grounded. I needed to get back to the real me. So part of this journey with my faith was trying to get back to the old me, you know, when I was younger, going through all those repressed memories. I used to go to church as a kid, and I remember fondly, you know, Easter egg and spoon races with the church, Kris Kringle sessions and carol sessions, and, you know, really positive memories. So that helped me just have some purpose in life. And, you know, the thing about faith and Christianity, it's about helping others. So I've used, you know, my own experience to try and help parents, women, kids, and help, you know, come up with a solution for all of these gender identity debates.
The reason I like your story so much is because I think a lot of people can relate to it. A lot of people are struggling to find their true self or their true identity. And I think they don't realise that in that search you can never be fulfilled, because there's always something else. And actually the search is for God, the search is for Christ. And once you direct the search away from yourself, then you find contentment, then you find fulfillment. Exactly.
You know, I kind of wish I could have found God a lot earlier in my life, but, you know, we all have different points in our life where we may find faith, or we may have it from birth. And I think it's an important moment. And I think in modern society, you know, so many young people aren't connecting with God and Jesus. They're not going to church. They're all day on TikTok, and they're not looking at that. And I think it can really help people, just an hour a day, you know, prayer, going to worship, and having that sense of kind of, I have a duty to make this world a better place. I should be helping people. And I also have a duty to love myself and those around me.
Oh, man. Ollie, there's so many stories I want to talk to you about with you. One of them is this crazy situation in Canada, where we have a man who has transitioned into a woman, and it didn't go as intended. He's having a lot of pain in his neo-vagina, as they call it. Excuse me, that's what the term they use. And he's opted to end his life, as they do in Canada with their medical euthanasia. And they've declined him at the moment, saying that maybe we'll look at it in the future. Now, this shows to me, I mean, you can give me your thoughts on this, but this shows to me that young people, vulnerable people, are being manipulated into thinking that the way to find happiness is to change their bodies and mutilate their bodies, and they're being manipulated by the society and the norms around them. And this is leading to people wanting to end their lives.
Absolutely. Well, originally when Canada introduced this law in 2016, it was for end of life, you know, for people that had terminal illness and they wanted to die with dignity. And then, you know, by 2021, you had 10,000 Canadians, around 3.3% of the deaths that year were by assisted suicide. But now what's happened is a couple of years ago, they introduced a mental health clause to assisted suicide, which is called MAID, M-A-I-D, in Canada. And they're now saying people that have mental health struggles can do this. So, you know, most people with gender identity struggles and that transition, they do struggle with their mental health. So the fact that this person, they had a vaginoplasty surgery in 2009, they've said that they've lived with incredible pain and discomfort that is so excruciating since then. And they've actually applied for assisted suicide. And I think that's heartbreaking, because that person has been betrayed by the doctors that did that procedure to them in the first place. And now, while their request has been rejected now, it could well, you know, as Canada becomes more and more woke with Justin Trudeau, it could include, you know, people that, you know, transition and they're struggling with their identity, and, you know, any young person, and so many young people have mental health, but if they really cared about, you know, people's lives and stuff, they would invest in mental health support.
I absolutely agree. I mean, the headline is the most bizarre headline I've read in a while. Trans Indigenous Canadian slams doctors for denying her euthanasia request, saying death would be better than her constant pain from a surgically built vagina. I mean, this is a cry for help, isn't it? We have to stop this mutilation, because this is becoming torture. And whilst activists talk of a trans genocide that doesn't exist, this could actually lead to a trans genocide if people who go through these operations realise that they're unhappy and in pain want to end their lives.
It's heartbreaking, and you know, many young people do struggle with mental health in this day and age. So if you're giving them an option to end their life, you know, a lot of people are going to do it. And some people that have applied to assisted suicide encounters, they've said because they struggle with money, they don't have enough money for housing and stuff, and that's one of the reasons why they want to end their life. You know, they can't afford certain things, healthcare, and you know, even food in some cases. And I think, you know, why aren't we helping these people and, you know, treating these people with mental health support instead of telling them that you have an option to die? That is not a resort for any human to have to go through. I just think it's truly tragic.
Ollie, you have to keep speaking your story because you've been through the transition, you've seen both sides of this, and you're absolutely right. We have to support people, help them, not affirm them and not mutilate their bodies. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ollie London, thank you for your time today. Now, each week on this show, we like to end with our closing prayer, and this week we'll hear the Collect for the 8th Sunday after Trinity, read by Sophie from LVS Ascot School.
O God, whose never-failing providence ordereth all things both in heaven and earth, we humbly beseech thee to put away from us all hurtful things, and to give us those things which be profitable for us, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
You have been watching Calvin's Common Sense Crusade with me, the Reverend Calvin Robinson. I won't be here next week. I'm off on holiday, and Emma Webb will be keeping my seat warm throughout August. Saturdays at 7 p.m, but I will be back in September. See you then. God bless. Des Fault.
On Mark Dolan tonight in My Big Opinion, with the Co-op supermarket reporting almost 200,000 offences in their stores in just half a year, Britain is now soft on crime. In My Take at 10, the wonderful children's comic The Beano gets a woke makeover. The real menace isn't Dennis, but these politically correct censors. My Mark Meets Guest is the author of a brand new book about the great train robber Ronnie Biggs, plus Royal Insider Lady Victoria Hervey on a major setback for Prince Harry. We're live from 9.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Hope you were able to enjoy some of the sunny spells we did have around today, but there are still some showers lingering on tonight and into tomorrow, particularly for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, where there's still the chance that some of those could be heavy. A few pushing into Western England, Wales through the Bristol Channel area, but eastern areas of England generally staying drier with some clear intervals. It's not going to be too chilly overnight for most of us, holding up around 12 to 14 degrees Celsius, might drop into single figures across the far northeast of Scotland. Showers from the word go as well for central Scotland, pushing their way down further south into northern England as well. Still the chance that they could be heavy, maybe the odd rumble of thunder during the day as well. For the southwest, though, we are going to see the cloud building as outbreaks of rain push their way in for Wales, southwest England, then into Northern Ireland and eventually southeast England later on as well. Where you do hold on to the sunshine, though, climbing to highs around 21, 22 degrees Celsius. That area of low pressure that's bringing this rain will steadily be progressing its way eastwards overnight. Light winds further to the north where those isobars are spaced well apart but squeezing together across the south. Really quite breezy first thing on Monday morning, potential for 40-mile-an-hour gusts along some coast of the English Channel. These outbreaks of rain still lingering in places as well. A few brighter spells for central England, but the rest of the sunshine certainly reserved for northern areas of Scotland.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
It's Saturday night, and this is the Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes, along with Albie Amoncona, Emily Carver, Benjamin Butterworth and Reem Ibrahim. Tonight on the show, why are we treating foreigners better than our own veterans?
Is anyone else sick of virtue-signalling celebrities like Carol Vorderman complaining about the Conservative Party?
Tony Blair's been talking a lot this week, hasn't he? What is he up to?
The era of global boiling is here, and you need to take off your tinfoil hats.
And why the nanny state needs to stay away from our booze.
It's 8 p.m, and this is the Saturday 5. Welcome to the Saturday 5. Whatever your political views may be, you can bank on us to deliver an hour of entertainment. I've finally recovered from the trauma of turning 30, Emily's jetted back from Santorini, and Benjamin has bravely made it into the studio despite breaking his fingernail last week whilst moving a toaster. Albie's here too, of course, and we're joined by the fantastic Reem Ibrahim from the Institute of Economic Affairs. Recently described